The whistle pierced the frozen air like a scream. Sarah's fingers clutched the metal railing as the train lurched forward, her knuckles white against the cold steel. She had exactly 30 seconds to grab her belongings and step onto the platform before the conductor sealed the doors. Her battered brown suitcase sat 3 rows back, wedged between a sleeping businessman and a stack of mail bags. "Wait," she called out, but her voice disappeared into the chaos of the crowded car. Bodies pressed against her from all sides as passengers shuffled toward the exit. The platform outside was nothing more than a wooden plank dusted with fresh snow, surrounded by an endless expanse of white emptiness. This wasn't supposed to be her stop. The conductor had announced it wrong, or perhaps she had heard it wrong. Either way, the mistake was about to cost her everything. Sarah pushed against the tide of people, her worn boots sliding on the damp floor. The businessman stirred, his elbow knocking against her suitcase. It teetered for a moment, then settled back into place. She was so close. Just 15 more feet and she could reach it. But the crowd had other plans. A woman with 2 crying children blocked her path, struggling with an overflowing bag of groceries. An elderly man moved at a glacial pace, his cane tapping methodically against the floor. "Please, I need to get through," Sarah pleaded, but her words were swallowed by the general commotion. The train whistle blew again, sharper this time, more urgent. 5 seconds. That's all she had left. She made a desperate lunge forward, her hand outstretched toward the suitcase. Her fingers grazed the leather handle just as someone's shoulder caught her from behind. The impact sent her stumbling backward, through the open door, onto the snow-covered platform. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. The cold seeped through her thin coat immediately, biting at her skin like 1,000 tiny needles. Above her, the train doors hissed shut with mechanical finality. Through the frosted window, she could see her suitcase, still wedged in that same spot, growing smaller as the train began to move. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. No, no, no. She ran alongside the accelerating train, her boots crunching through the fresh powder. The metal beast picked up speed, its wheels grinding against the frozen tracks. She waved her arms frantically, screaming for someone, anyone, to pull the emergency brake. A few faces appeared in the windows, curious and detached, watching her with the mild interest one might show a street performer. Then the train rounded a bend and disappeared into the white void, taking with it everything she owned. Her clothes, her mother's wedding ring, the photograph of her daughter, the money she had saved for 3 years, the letter of employment that was supposed to change her life. All of it, gone in an instant. Sarah stood alone on the platform, her chest heaving, watching the empty tracks stretch into nothingness. The snow fell harder now, thick flakes that clung to her hair and eyelashes. She turned slowly, taking in her surroundings for the first time. There was no station building, no shelter of any kind. Just the wooden platform, a faded sign that read Miller's Crossing, and an ocean of white that extended in every direction until it met the gray sky. The wind picked up, howling across the open plains with a sound like distant wolves. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, but it did nothing to stop the shivering that had already begun. Her teeth chattered as reality settled over her like a shroud. She was stranded in the middle of nowhere, in a snowstorm, with nothing but the clothes on her back. The temperature was dropping fast. Night would come soon, and with it, the kind of cold that killed. She had to move. Standing here would accomplish nothing except hastening her own death. But which direction? Every way looked the same, an endless white landscape without landmarks or signs of civilization. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember what she had seen from the train window before her world had collapsed. There had been something, hadn't there? A structure of some kind, dark against the snow, maybe a mile or 2 back the way they had come. It was her only hope. Sarah stepped off the platform and began to walk. Jack Morrison had been ranching in Montana for 43 years, and he knew the signs of a bad storm when he saw one. The cattle were restless, bunching together near the barn despite the hay he had scattered across the east pasture. The sky had that particular shade of gray that meant serious snow, the kind that buried fence posts and trapped livestock in ravines. He needed to get the herd into the shelter before conditions deteriorated further. He was riding his horse, Duke, along the northern fence line when he saw it. A dark shape against the white landscape, too geometric to be natural. Jack squinted through the falling snow, his weathered hand shading his eyes. At first, he thought it might be a piece of debris blown from one of the neighboring properties, maybe a sheet of roofing or a tarp. But as Duke carried him closer, the shape resolved into something unmistakable. A suitcase. A brown leather suitcase, sitting upright in the snow as if someone had carefully placed it there and walked away. Jack dismounted, his boots sinking into the powder. The suitcase was old but well maintained, with brass buckles and reinforced corners. It showed no signs of damage, no indication that it had fallen from a vehicle or been discarded. Someone had set it down deliberately. But why here? There was nothing around for miles except his ranch, and the nearest road was 3 miles south. He picked up the suitcase, surprised by its weight. Whatever was inside hadn't been packed lightly. Jack looked around, searching for footprints or any sign of the owner. The falling snow had covered most tracks, but he could make out a faint trail leading east, toward the railroad tracks. His stomach tightened. The train had come through about an hour ago. He had heard its whistle while fixing the barn door, a lonely sound that echoed across the empty plains. If someone had gotten off at Miller's Crossing, they were in serious trouble. The old platform was 7 miles from his ranch house, and there was nothing else out here. No towns, no houses, nothing but frozen wilderness. Jack secured the suitcase to Duke's saddle and swung himself back up. The ethical choice was clear. Someone was out there, possibly lost, definitely in danger. He turned Duke toward the railroad tracks and urged him into a steady trot. The wind was strengthening, driving the snow horizontally now, reducing visibility to barely 50 feet. Finding someone in this would be like searching for a needle in a haystack, but he had to try. The tracks appeared through the white curtain after 20 minutes of hard riding. Jack followed them west, his eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of movement. The snow was coming down so thick now that he could barely see Duke's ears in front of him. His face was numb, his fingers stiff inside his gloves. If he felt this cold after just 30 minutes of exposure, what must the suitcase's owner be experiencing? He almost missed her. A slight depression in the snow, a hint of darker color against the white. Jack pulled Duke to a halt and dismounted, his heart racing. There, half buried in a drift, was a woman. She was curled into a tight ball, her thin coat completely inadequate for the conditions. Snow had accumulated on her back and hair, giving her the appearance of a small hill. "Oh!" Jack called out, dropping to his knees beside her. No response. He pulled off his glove and pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. There it was, faint but steady. She was alive, but barely. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as the snow around her. Hypothermia had already set in. Jack didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms, surprised by how light she was, and lifted her onto Duke's back. She didn't wake, didn't even stir. He mounted behind her, holding her against his chest to share his body heat, and turned Duke toward home. The ranch house was at least 5 miles away through the storm. It would be the longest ride of his life. The wind screamed around them, trying to tear the woman from his grasp. Jack held her tighter, tucking her head under his chin, using his larger body to shield her from the worst of the elements. Duke was steady beneath them, the old horse finding his way through pure instinct when visibility dropped to nothing. Minutes stretched into hours as they pushed through the blizzard. Jack talked to her the whole way, even though she couldn't hear him. He told her about the ranch, about the cattle, about the warm fire waiting at home. He told her she was going to be okay, that she just needed to hold on a little longer. He prayed, something he hadn't done in years, bargaining with whatever God might be listening. "Save her," he pleaded silently. "Let me get her home in time." When the lights of his ranch house finally appeared through the snow, Jack nearly wept with relief. He slid off Duke and carried the woman to the door, kicking it open with his boot. The warmth hit him like a physical force after the brutal cold outside. His housekeeper, Martha, looked up from the stove, her eyes widening in shock. "Get blankets and start the bath," Jack ordered, carrying the woman toward the bathroom. "Lukewarm water, not hot. And call Doc Henderson. Tell him it's an emergency." Martha moved without questions, her experienced hands already reaching for supplies. Jack laid the woman in the bathtub, clothes and all, and began running tepid water over her. Her core temperature would be dangerously low. Warming her too quickly could send her into cardiac arrest. As the water slowly brought color back to her skin, Jack allowed himself to breathe. He had found her in time. She would live. The question now was who she was, and what had brought her to that godforsaken platform in the middle of a blizzard. Sarah's return to consciousness was gradual, like swimming up through dark water toward a distant light. First came sensation, warmth seeping into her bones after what felt like an eternity of cold. Then sound, the crackle of a fire, the murmur of voices, the soft whistle of wind against windows. Finally, awareness, the knowledge that she was alive when by all rights she should be dead. Her eyelids felt heavy, weighted down by exhaustion and trauma. It took 3 attempts before she managed to open them. The room swam into focus slowly, revealing wooden beams overhead, a stone fireplace across from the bed, and curtains drawn against what looked like evening darkness. She was in a bedroom, tucked under what felt like a dozen quilts, warm and dry and safe. A woman sat in a chair beside the bed, knitting something with practiced efficiency. She was in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. When she noticed Sarah stirring, she set down her needles and leaned forward with a gentle smile. "Welcome back to the land of the living, dear," the woman said, her voice carrying the soft drawl of someone who had spent their entire life in these parts. "You gave us quite a scare. How are you feeling?" Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was dry, her voice barely a whisper. "Where am I?" "Morrison Ranch, about 7 miles from where Jack found you. I'm Martha, the housekeeper. You've been sleeping for nearly 18 hours. Martha poured water from a pitcher into a glass and held it to Sarah's lips. The cool liquid was heaven. "Small sips now. Your body's been through quite an ordeal." Memories flooded back in a rush. The train, the suitcase, the endless white expanse, the cold that had seeped into her very soul. Sarah's hand flew to her chest, panic rising. "My things, I had a suitcase on the train, I lost everything." "Is it brown leather with brass buckles?" Martha asked. When Sarah nodded frantically, the older woman's smile widened. "Jack found it in the snow. That's how he knew to look for you. It's downstairs, safe and sound. Everything inside is just fine." The relief was so intense that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. Her mother's ring, the photograph, the money, the job letter. They weren't gone. She hadn't lost everything after all. The tears came faster now, spilling down her cheeks in hot streams. All the fear and desperation and hopelessness of the past day poured out of her. Martha didn't try to stop her or offer empty platitudes. She simply sat there, occasionally patting Sarah's hand, letting her cry until she had nothing left. When the tears finally subsided, the housekeeper handed her a handkerchief and stood up. "I'll let Jack know you're awake. He's been worried sick about you." Martha paused at the door. "You're safe here, dear. Whatever trouble brought you out to that platform, you're safe now." After Martha left, Sarah took stock of herself. She was wearing a nightgown that wasn't hers, soft flannel that smelled like lavender. Someone had tended to her with care, had saved her life and asked nothing in return. The thought was both comforting and unsettling. She owed these people everything, and she had no way to repay them. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, her voice stronger now. The man who entered was tall and lean, somewhere in his early 60s, with gray stubble on his jaw and eyes the color of storm clouds. He carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had spent their life working with their hands, solving problems through action rather than words. He stopped just inside the doorway, holding his hat respectfully. "Name's Jack Morrison," he said. "This is my ranch. How are you feeling, miss?" "Sarah. Sarah Chen." She pushed herself up to sitting, ignoring the way the room spun slightly. "I'm alive because of you. Thank you doesn't seem like enough, but thank you." Jack shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same. You want to tell me what you were doing out there?" "Miller's Crossing hasn't had a regular stop in 10 years. That train only slows down there in emergencies." Sarah explained haltingly, the story tumbling out between apologies. The confusion on the train, the desperate attempt to reach her suitcase, being pushed out onto the platform. Jack listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. "So you were headed to Billings?" he asked when she finished. "For a job?" "A teaching position at the elementary school. I'm supposed to start Monday morning." Sarah glanced at the window, trying to gauge the time. "What day is it?" "Saturday evening. The storm's still going strong outside, has been for the past day and a half. Nothing's moving on the roads or rails until it clears." Jack saw the distress on her face and held up a calming hand. "Don't worry. Once the weather breaks, I'll drive you to Billings myself. You'll make your appointment." "I can't ask you to do that. You've already done so much." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Jack's tone left no room for argument. "Besides, I need to return your suitcase. Can't have you showing up to your new job without your belongings." Sarah studied him, this stranger who had saved her life and was now offering to disrupt his own schedule to help her further. There was something solid about him, dependable, the kind of person who did what needed doing without seeking credit or reward. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Jack was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. 20 years ago, my daughter ran away from home. She was 17, angry at the world, thought she knew everything. I tried to find her, hired investigators, put up posters, everything. Never saw her again. He met Sarah's eyes. I like to think that somewhere along the way, someone helped her when she needed it. Maybe this is my way of balancing the scales. The weight of his loss hung in the air between them. Sarah understood then that this wasn't just about her. It was about a father's lingering hope, a wound that had never fully healed. "I'm sorry about your daughter," she said softly. Jack nodded, clearing his throat. "Get some rest. Martha will bring you dinner in a bit. We'll talk more tomorrow when you're feeling stronger." After he left, Sarah lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. She had come within inches of death, had been saved by pure chance and the decency of a stranger. The world suddenly felt both more dangerous and more full of grace than she had ever imagined. By Sunday morning, Sarah was strong enough to leave the bedroom. Martha had laid out fresh clothes, simple but clean, and Sarah dressed slowly, her muscles still protesting from her ordeal. When she made her way downstairs, the smell of coffee and bacon drew her toward the kitchen like a lifeline. The ranch house was larger than it had seemed from her bedroom window. The main room featured high ceilings with exposed beams, a massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall, and windows that looked out over a landscape still buried under snow. The storm had eased somewhat, though white flakes continued to drift lazily from the gray sky. Jack sat at a large wooden table, reading a newspaper and sipping coffee from a chipped mug. He stood when he saw her, gesturing to an empty chair. "Morning. Hope you're hungry. Martha tends to make enough breakfast to feed the entire county." Sarah sat gratefully, accepting the plate of eggs, bacon, and toast that Martha set before her. She ate ravenously, her body demanding fuel after its trauma. Jack watched her with quiet amusement, occasionally refilling her coffee cup without being asked. "Your suitcase is in the hall closet," he said when she finally pushed her empty plate away. "I didn't open it, but I did make sure it stayed dry." "Thank you. For everything. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know what else to say." Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, drawing warmth from the ceramic. "How much do I owe you? For the doctor, the clothes, the food, everything?" Jack waved the question away. "Doc Henderson is a friend. He didn't charge anything. The clothes belong to my daughter, been sitting in storage for 20 years. As for the food, we were eating anyway. You don't owe me a thing. There has to be something I can do. Some way to repay you." Martha, who had been cleaning the kitchen, spoke up. "You know, Jack, Sarah could help us with that project we've been putting off." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What project?" "The letters." Martha gave him a meaningful look. "You know, the ones in the attic. We've been saying for years that someone should organize them, maybe even try to contact some of those people." Understanding dawned on Jack's face, followed quickly by hesitation. Sarah looked between them, confused. "What letters?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table. Finally, he sighed. "When my daughter left, I got desperate. I put ads in newspapers across 5 states, contacted every shelter and youth organization I could find. People started writing to me. Hundreds of them, over the years. Some had seen runaway girls and wanted to help. Some were runaways themselves, telling me their stories. Some were parents like me, searching for their own lost children." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow. "I kept every letter. Thought maybe one day I'd be able to help some of those people the way I couldn't help myself. But the box just kept getting bigger, and I kept getting older, and I never did anything with them. They're just sitting up there, gathering dust." Sarah felt something stir in her chest, a sense of purpose she hadn't expected. "I could help organize them. Create a system, maybe even try to follow up on some of them." "It's a big job," Jack warned. "There are probably 500 letters up there, maybe more. And most of the information is 20 years old. The trail is cold. But not impossible," Sarah countered. "People leave footprints, even years later. Social media, public records, phone directories. If even one of those families finds closure because we tried, wouldn't it be worth it?" Jack turned to face her, something like hope flickering in his eyes. "The storm's supposed to clear by tonight. Roads should be passable by Monday afternoon. That doesn't give us much time. Then we'd better get started." The attic was exactly what Sarah expected. Dusty, cramped, filled with the accumulated debris of decades. Jack pulled the chain on a single bare bulb, illuminating boxes stacked against the sloped walls. He pointed to 3 large cardboard boxes near the back. Those are the letters. I organized them by year, at least initially. After a while, I just started throwing them in whatever box had room. He looked embarrassed by the admission. I wasn't in a good place back then. Sarah pulled the first box toward her and opened it. Inside were hundreds of envelopes, some yellowed with age, others still crisp and white. She picked one up at random and pulled out the letter inside. The handwriting was shaky, the words carefully formed. Dear Mr. Morrison, I saw your ad in the Spokane newspaper. I think I might have seen your daughter last spring at a shelter here. She had a tattoo of a bird on her wrist and said her name was Jackie. I'm writing because I ran away too, 5 years ago, and I wish someone had looked for me the way you're looking for her. Even if this isn't her, please don't stop searching. It matters more than you know. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She looked up at Jack, who was watching her carefully. These aren't just letters. They're pieces of people's hearts. I know. His voice was rough. That's why I could never throw them away. They worked through the morning and into the afternoon, sorting letters into piles, possible sightings of Jack's daughter, other missing children, parents seeking help, runaways reaching out. Sarah created a spreadsheet on an old laptop Martha dug out from somewhere, logging names, dates, locations, any identifying details. As they worked, Jack told her stories. About his daughter Emily, who had loved horses and hated math, who could make him laugh even on his worst days. About the fight they'd had before she left, stupid and pointless, the kind of argument that shouldn't have destroyed a family but did. About the years of searching, the false leads, the slowly dying hope. I never stopped looking, he said quietly, holding a letter dated 15 years ago. Even when everyone told me to move on, I couldn't. She's out there somewhere, living some life I know nothing about. Or she's not, and I'll never know what happened. Both possibilities keep me up at night. Sarah reached across the dusty attic floor and squeezed his hand. These letters, all these people reaching out, it shows that you're not alone in this. That there are hundreds of people who understand your pain and want to help. I just wish I had done something with them sooner. Half these people have probably moved on, changed addresses, maybe even found what they were looking for. Or maybe they're still searching, just like you. Maybe we can help them. Sarah pulled out another letter, this one more recent. Look at this. It's from 3 years ago. A woman in Oregon, looking for her son who ran away when he was 16. He'd be 23 now. She lists distinguishing marks, habits, favorite places. This is detailed enough that we might actually be able to find him. Jack read the letter, his expression thoughtful. You really think we could track these people down? I think we owe it to them to try. They worked until the light fading through the attic window forced them to stop. By then, they had sorted through 2 of the 3 boxes and compiled a list of 30 cases that seemed promising enough to pursue. Sarah's teaching position suddenly felt less urgent than this unexpected mission. As they climbed down from the attic, Sarah made a decision. What if I stayed? Just for a few more days, maybe a week. I could call the school, explain there was an emergency. They might be willing to push back my start date. Jack stopped on the ladder, looking up at her with surprise. You'd do that? Put off your new job to help me with this? You saved my life. This seems like a small thing in comparison. Sarah smiled. Besides, I have a feeling this is where I'm supposed to be right now. Sometimes getting lost is how we find our way. The storm finally broke that evening, leaving the world outside blanketed in fresh white snow that sparkled under the emerging stars. Sarah stood at the window, watching the landscape transform from threatening to beautiful. Behind her, Jack was on the phone with the school in Billings, explaining the situation with the authority of someone who expected to be believed. When he hung up, he was grinning. They were very understanding. Said you can start a week from Monday, giving you plenty of time to recover and get settled. Sarah turned to face him, feeling something shift inside her chest. For the first time since stepping off that train, she didn't feel lost. She felt found. Sarah stayed at Morrison Ranch for 12 days that stretched into 3 weeks, and those 3 weeks changed everything. The work they did with the letters became all-consuming. Each morning, they would gather at the kitchen table with coffee and laptops, diving into the digital trails people left across the internet. Social media proved to be their most valuable tool. A name, an approximate age, a hometown. These details were often enough to find someone, or at least find people who knew them. Their first success came on day 5. A letter from a mother in Idaho, written 18 years ago, searching for her daughter who had run away at 15. The girl's name was Christina Bowman, and she had a birthmark on her left shoulder shaped like a crescent moon. Sarah found her in 40 minutes. Christina Bowman Martinez, age 33, living in Portland with her husband and 2 children, working as a dental hygienist. The phone call was awkward at first. Christina hadn't spoken to her mother in nearly 2 decades, and the old wounds were still raw. But Sarah persisted gently, explaining how they had found her, sharing pieces of her mother's letter without pushing too hard. When Christina finally agreed to call her mother, Sarah heard Jack quietly excuse himself from the room. She found him outside by the horse barn, staring at the horizon. "You okay?" she asked softly. "Just thinking. That could have been Emily. Somewhere out there, living her life, maybe with a family of her own. Maybe willing to talk if someone just asked the right way." He turned to her, his eyes wet. "What you did in there, bringing that family back together, that matters. That's real." "We're just getting started," Sarah said. "We have 29 more cases to work through." Not all the stories had happy endings. They discovered obituaries for 3 of the missing children, notifications that broke their hearts even as they provided closure to desperate parents. Some trails went cold no matter how hard they searched. But they found 7 more families and reconnected them, each reunion a small miracle that made the failures bearable. Jack opened up more as the days passed. He showed Sarah pictures of Emily, told her stories about teaching his daughter to ride, about camping trips to Glacier National Park, about the day she got her driver's license and promptly backed into his truck. The memories were bittersweet, but sharing them seemed to lighten the burden he had carried alone for so long. Sarah told him about her own life in return. About growing up in Seattle, her mother who had immigrated from Taiwan and worked 3 jobs to put Sarah through college. About her ex-husband, the divorce that had left her broke and desperate to start over somewhere new. About choosing Billings because it was far enough away from her old life but close enough that she wouldn't feel completely unmoored. "And then I ended up on that train," she said one evening as they sat by the fireplace, sorting through the final box of letters. "Got pushed off at the wrong stop, lost everything I owned, nearly froze to death in a blizzard. Looking back, it seems almost orchestrated. Like something bigger than me needed me to be here." Jack smiled. "I've been thinking the same thing. What are the odds? You losing your suitcase at the exact spot where I would find it, in weather bad enough that you couldn't walk to safety but not so bad that I couldn't find you. It's like the universe was playing matchmaker." "Matchmaker?" Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "For this project, I mean." But there was something in Jack's eyes that suggested he meant more than that. "You've brought life back to this place, Sarah. Martha says it's like watching the house wake up after a long sleep. I'm starting to think maybe I've been asleep too." The school in Billings called on week 3. The teacher Sarah was replacing had decided to return after all, and they no longer had a position available. Sarah should have been devastated. This job had been her lifeline, her escape route, her fresh start. Instead, she felt oddly relieved. "I guess that settles it," she told Jack after hanging up. "I need to figure out my next move. Or you could stay." The words came out quickly, as if Jack had been holding them back and they finally burst free. "I know it's presumptuous, and you have your own life to live. But this ranch is big, and there's always work to do. Martha's been wanting to retire for years but won't leave me alone here. If you stayed, she could finally take that trip to see her grandkids in Florida. And the letter project, we've barely scratched the surface." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. "Stay? Like, permanently?" "I'm not asking you to marry me or anything," Jack said quickly, looking flustered. "I just mean, there's a guest house out back that's been empty for years. You could live there, help with the ranch, keep working on the letters. I'd pay you a fair wage, and you'd have your independence. It's just an offer, something to consider." Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the ranch that had become familiar over the past weeks. She knew the routine now, when the horses needed feeding, where the chickens liked to hide their eggs, which fence sections needed mending. She knew the sound of Jack's truck coming up the drive and the smell of Martha's coffee in the morning. She knew the quiet satisfaction of hard work and the deeper satisfaction of meaningful work. "Can I see the guest house?" she asked. It was small but charming, with a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a living area with windows that looked toward the mountains. It needed cleaning and some minor repairs, but Sarah could already imagine making it her own. She could see herself here, building a life that was nothing like the one she had planned but somehow better. "I'll stay," she said, turning to Jack with a smile that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. "On one condition." "Name it." "We keep working on the letters until we've contacted every single family. No giving up, no matter how hard it gets." Jack extended his hand, and Sarah shook it firmly. Deal. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the newly renovated guest house, hanging the last of her pictures on the wall. The photograph of her daughter held pride of place above the mantel, next to a new picture. The entire Morrison Ranch family, including Sarah, Martha, the ranch hands, and even the dogs, all smiling in front of the barn. They had found 17 more families, reconnected dozens of people who had thought they would never speak again. The letter project had expanded, with people across the country sending new requests for help finding lost loved ones. Sarah had created a website and a non-profit organization, with Jack as co-founder. They were making a real difference in the world. But more than that, Sarah had found something she hadn't been looking for: home. Not just a place, but a purpose, a community, a future she could believe in. The train had left her in the snow, abandoned and alone. But in that abandonment, she had found salvation. Jack knocked on her door that evening, holding a bottle of wine. Martha made pot roast. Thought you might want to join us for dinner to celebrate your official move-in day. I'd love to. Sarah grabbed her jacket and followed him out into the twilight. The ranch was beautiful in the fading light, the mountains purple against the darkening sky, the first stars beginning to appear overhead. You ever regret it? Jack asked as they walked. Staying here instead of going to Billings? Sarah thought about the question seriously. She thought about the life she had planned, the teaching job that would have been fine but not exceptional, the apartment she would have rented in a city where she knew no one. She thought about all the families they had helped, all the tears and laughter and healing they had witnessed. Not for a second, she said honestly. Getting lost on that train was the best thing that ever happened to me. They reached the main house, where warm light spilled from the windows and the smell of pot roast made Sarah's stomach growl. Martha waved from the kitchen window, gesturing for them to hurry up before the food got cold. As Sarah stepped inside, surrounded by the sounds of home and the people who had become her family, she thought about that brown suitcase sitting on the train, about the moment of panic when she realized she had lost everything. She understood now that sometimes you had to lose everything to find what really mattered. The train had left her in the snow, but the snow had brought her exactly where she needed to be.